Hey friend, in today's watercolor tutorial, I'm going to be teaching how to paint this overhead bird's eye view beach landscape. Without further ado, let's get painting. For today's watercolor tutorial, I'm going to be using Cobalt Turquoise, Aqua Green, Prussian Blue, Black, Sap Green, and Burnt Umber. The paper I've taped down here is a size 5 by 7 inches, and the brushes I'll be using are Princeton brand sizes 6 and size 12. I'll also be using some white acrylic paint for our waves. The acrylic has a beautiful texture to it that I think will be really fun to use. If you don't have white acrylic, you could also use some white gouache or even some white tempera paint. All right, to get started, I want to lay out some of our beach area. So I'm just going to take my size 12 brush and take a little bit of watered down burnt umber. And starting in this left corner, I'm just going to do an undertone of some sand here. And I'm using, as you can see, a very light wash of burnt umber. And I'm going to just do this in the first few inches of the painting. Just about all the way to this right corner here, just swooping down. Okay, so once I have this laid out, I'm now just gonna allow that to sit and hang out. And while it dries, I would like to kind of get started on our water here. I'm gonna just first start by adding a wash of water all across the page up until we get to our sandy burnt umber beach. So I'll just let that bleed out and mesh with this water wash that we're now laying out. Okay, so while this is still wet, I am going to take a little bit of Cobalt Turquoise, and I'm just going to start by incorporating a nice wash of this color. And I'm starting light. We're gonna really build this painting quite a bit, but I'm just doing a nice light wash of it. Then I'm just gonna take my watered down brush with some plain water here and just slightly overlap the beach with the Cobalt Turquoise. Okay. And next, I want to take a little bit of Aqua Green and do another kind of loose layered effect with this Aqua Green, letting it really be loose and watery. It's not really a dark value of the color, but just nice and loose and more on the paler side. Next, we'll take some Prussian Blue. And I'm just going to do the same thing where I overlap the Prussian Blue slightly and then just do this swooping left to right motion using nice broad brush strokes. And then lastly, I'm going to take some black in this bottom right corner and just kind of buff it out by overlapping slightly on the Prussian Blue. Okay, so next up here, I want to take some white acrylic paint. You could also use some white gouache if that's what you have, but for this particular painting, I'm actually going to be utilizing some of the acrylic. And to start, I want to start layering some white acrylic paint just slightly below where the Cobalt Turquoise will be meeting the Burnt Umber wash, or the sandy beaches. And as you can see, I'm just randomly texturizing this acrylic paint, or whitewash is fine again. I really like the texture that the acrylic paint gives in this particular painting. And I'm just letting it be kind of loose and chunky. And I am just adding some variegation in the waves. So some parts are maybe a little bit more thinner, or some kind of angle more inward towards the beach. But I love this thick texture that the acrylic is giving these waves here. Okay, so I'm just gonna let that set, and I am going to do a second layer of waves just a couple inches back here. And this one is going to be slightly thinner than this more whitewash one that's towards the shore. And again, I have some variegation with some of the blue popping through the white. It's not a solid white line, but it's got just a few areas of a pop of white. Okay, so next up, I'm just gonna rinse off my size 6 brush. And while these areas of the white are still a little bit wet, I am going to kind of layer a little bit of watercolor paint within some of these kind of gaps here. So starting with this wave we just laid out, I'm gonna add just a touch of some Prussian Blue, kind of slightly amidst the gaps here. This is just going to add a lot more dimension to the wave. And next I'm going to take some Cobalt Turquoise and do the same thing on this first wave here, just layering a bit while the acrylic is still wet. Okay, so next I want to add a little bit more dimension and depth to our water. So I am going to switch gears to our size 12 brush again. And starting with our darker water first, I'm going to do another wash of water. And I'm going to first layer a good amount of variegated just Prussian Blue, all the way touching the white wave, right to that border. And then I'm going to take a little bit of black and just blot a few touches of black. I want it to look variegated, so I'm not, making it a perfectly smooth gradation here. Next, I'm just going to rinse off my size 12 brush and take some water and do a wash in the center area between the two waves. Okay, so in this area that's more towards the second wave that we painted, I'm gonna just allow some Prussian Blue to kind of bleed out into the water. And I'm just painting this Prussian Blue on that rim of the second wave here, and allowing the Prussian Blue to be very variegated and not perfectly a smooth gradient. Just allowing some deeper concentrations to kind of pop and give some variety in the water. And then while that area is still wet, I'm just going to switch gears now to my size 6 brush, and I'm going to take some Aqua Green, and I'm just going to paint a little bit of Aqua Green along the rim of our first wave. And I'm just going to allow this Aqua Green to just kind of bleed out, utilizing wet and wet watercolor technique here. Okay, and then from here, I am going to just grab my size 12 brush real quick and do another wash of water along the front, this front area of the beach. I'm just going to overlap the water just evenly across the surface, just kind of layered on top here, all the way to the whitewash. And then I'm going to take my size 6 brush and I'm going to take a little bit of Cobalt Turquoise and just allow that to do its thing. Ooh, love that. Love it when that happens. And allow it to just bleed out into the water. Just allowing the blooms to kind of mesh and overlap on some of that burnt umber. And don't worry too much as it bleeds. Just kind of let it do its thing. That's the beautiful part about watercolors, not making it perfect, but nice and loose. Next, I'm going to take my sap green, and while this wash is still wet, I'm just going to apply some really loose blots of our sap green here. I just want a little bit of a tropical kind of look to this beach here. So I'm just applying some blots of this sap green. All in this left corner here. And then to help give it just a little bit of shading, I'm gonna mix a little bit of Prussian Blue with some sap green, just to get a nice deeper rich green. That's just gonna give it a little bit of shading, so that way the plain sap green is more of a pop of highlight. And then I'm just going to take some just a little bit of sap green just to kind of extend some of the greenery and not make it look like a perfectly uniform shape here. I just want a little bit of variegation of the green. And there we have it. Thank you so much for joining me in today's watercolor beach tutorial. Be sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any further watercolor tutorials.